Welcome back to the Royal Chronicles. We have returned from our summer hiatus.
Good to be back.
Yes, and actually, this is the first time we're recording in Luke's shop.
Yes.
Coffee shop, which is fun.
We might do it more in the future.
Yeah, it's kind of pleasant in here. We're recording on a Sunday evening, so it's closed. He's doing his weekly baking, and it's nice. Nice and quiet, not a bunch of people.
Yeah.
All the coffee and pastries you want. Anytime. It's great. Anyway, so we're back. I guess we're considering this a new season, first episode of the new season. And we had discussed a lot of other people and royals and so forth. But I got on this Russian history kick lately, and I've been through books and podcasts and lecture series and all this. For, I don't know. I just get on these things and I wear it out until I've exhausted all of the resources. Anyways, my point is today we are going to be delving into Peter the Great of Russia, who is not the first Tsar, but it seems to me, I was just telling you off air, Luke, that a lot of the books and stuff that I've read, it's like everybody starts with him, even though there's a lot of Russian history before, he came along. But he's like the first big name that people talk about.
Yeah, I mean, he was the first Tsar who really focused more on Russia's connection to the West than its more Eastern and sort of inward looking focus. That the previous Tsars had that mindset had prevailed for a lot of their history. Which
that would make sense why so many Westerners would focus on him, because of his focus on the West,
Yes.
We are somewhat self-centered.
Well, and he was really successful because during his reign, he really changed the shape of Russia and the culture by his sort of westward focus.
Yeah.
Making them more of a hybrid nation, where they combined their tradition with the, more modern technology and Western fashions.
Right. And that really carries on today if you think about it, because this is not all Russia, even though, as I say, my mind is just overflowing with Russian facts because of all the stuff I've been reading. It is the largest country in the world. We're talking land wise. It's considered Eurasia because you have St. Petersburg, which we'll get into that, because Peter the Great's responsible pretty much for the magnificence that is St. Petersburg. And it was considered the window to the West because it's on the far west side of the country. But then you go, I think it's 11 time zones to the east. That's how many time zones they have in Russia. And you're basically it's very much Asian in that part.
Well, it's basically Alaska at the farthest end.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, very much in Asia.
It blows my mind when you think about that. But
it's
anyway,
this transcontinental country.
Yes, I find it fascinating. But in any case, so Peter the Great, we can focus in on that. We don't have to belabor too much of his childhood. It's kind of your typical grew up royal household, tutors, nannies, that sort of thing. But there's a kind of an interesting little thing where I don't remember at what age, he's fairly young, when he kind of formed his own little military regimen.
Yes, his personal guard.
Yeah, and it was almost like he was just kind of playing, but they did like real drills, parades, exercises. They had uniforms and the whole 9 yards.
And they came in handy when he wanted to exercise his personal power later on.
Yes, we'll get to that.
But another thing about him is that he's really considered to be the last Tsar raised in, I guess you'd call it, medieval Russia. And, this is contemporary with things going on in Europe. Like the Hanoverians are ruling in England and the Bourbons are ruling in France, but Russia is still in a very pre-modern mindset and ruling style.
Yeah, it seems like they always were kind of playing catch up. If you're trying to not copy, but kind of stay on par with the West, quote unquote, you would say that they're playing catch up.
But the other thing that's funny about it is that their particular style of government was actually very close to what so many of the Western rulers had been trying to achieve, this almost absolute power within their realm. And the czars had basically held on to it and hadn't had to give away as much power as the kings of France had during the Middle Ages or the Holy Roman emperors.
Mm-hmm.
So when they made it to the, Enlightenment era, they still had all of this personal power. So they could just be the enlightened monarchs everybody else wanted to be, even though enlightened is very, I don't know. I guess you could call it relative because they would consider themselves enlightened. Not sure if their subjects would have.
Well, I mean, yeah. So do you want to kind of breeze through his upbringing, not in great detail, because I feel that there are more interesting.
Sure, I can do just a quick rundown.
Go for it.
So, he was the son of the Tsar, but he was the son of his father's second marriage, and he had two older siblings, a older sister and an older brother. On the death of their father, he and his brother were made joint czars, ruling together. His older brother, who wasn't too much older than him, they were pretty close in age, seems to have had some kind of developmental disorder or some sort of degenerative disease, because his health was always very poor, and a lot of people in the court thought he wouldn't live long. So during this time, when both of them were minors, their older sister acted as regent for them.
Sophia, correct?
Yes. And she was a very determined woman who had managed to take control of the reins of power. And while her brothers were both minors, she was the acting ruler of the country. Basically, uncontested supreme ruler.
And it seems to me that as time went on, she began to fear for her authority and power, and towards the end became quite paranoid about it.
Yes. So like I said, there were two families here. So she's from the older branch, and he's from the younger wife's. He's the younger wife's child. And Sophia seemed to consider herself and her mother's children, all of her side, to be the legitimate ones.
Of course.
And Peter to be not as legitimate somehow. So she basically tried to keep him from ever taking control. If she had had her way, she would have been the empress, and not sure how succession would have worked, but he never would have taken charge.
Yes, but as we know, he did.
Yes.
Which
violently.
Yes. I believe I read that the paranoia of which I was speaking, she began to fear, or maybe she was just stirring the pot, saying that at the kind of the military regimen that Peter had created, as I talked about earlier, she was saying that, oh, maybe they could come and storm the city and take over, which was ridiculous because that little group was nothing compared to the guard that she had. So I just thought it was funny. It was like a little play regiment is going to come and overthrow.
But it still shows you that she felt threatened.
Oh,
she knew that he, being a male heir and being already crowned as Tsar, even though he wasn't exercising power, that was a serious threat to her. And in the history of the Tsars, it was not an impossible thing for a rival to come in and either bribe or convince the members of the palace guard or the army to take their side and overthrow the current ruler. So she had good reason to be paranoid.
Well, as what ended up happening. Yeah.
Yes.
There's a little side note before we get to him taking power. There's this interesting story about, I think he was 15 or 16 years old. And at the time, he and his mother had been banned to some place, very long Russian word that I don't know how to pronounce. So I'm not going to butcher it. I'm trying to learn how to, pronounce Russian words, but it's extremely challenging for me. Anyway, he
Yeah, I can't pronounce it either, but it was one of the royal family's more isolated residences.
You're right.
So it was kind of,
hence the banishment.
yeah, it was kind of the attempt to just keep them from gaining any influence in the capital.
But while he was there, like I said, around 15, 16 years old, he discovered, like in an attic or a storage area or something, an English ship. I guess like
yes,
what's the word I'm looking for?
A model.
Yes, a model. And from that, learned how to sail.
Well, he did construct larger scale ships based on the model.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would, I guess you could say hire, he would go into the taverns outside Moscow and look for English or Western sailors.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd talk to them about, how does this work on a ship? And could you show me how, these different riggings, how it works? And then he practiced with his little models on the lake with his buddies.
Right.
So yeah, he pretty much figured it out just through conversations and building a bigger model.
My goodness. Well, moving along, let's get to his taking power, which occurred in 1689. Or was when that's when it all got the ball rolling. And at that point, his Sophia, who was the regent that we were speaking about,
Mm-hmm.
I believe she was at that point kind of in a more weakened position because of what had been going on in Crimea.
Yes.
Correct. So was this, I guess this was the point where maybe that's where some of the insecurity came from, because she knew she was not in the best position to retain power.
Yeah. So she'd had some unsuccessful military campaigns against the Ottomans and the remaining Tartar forces
Mm-hmm.
down in Crimea and on the southern border, and that losing wars is never a good look for a ruler.
Yeah, especially a female, I would imagine.
Yes, and the other problem was that in those campaigns, she gave most of the authority to a small group of favorites. They were mainly brothers, and one of them was believed to be her, like, I don't know, paramour, lover guy. And that, unsuccessful in war and giving a bunch of power to a small group of favorites. All of these things are a recipe for bad outcomes in royalty.
Poor leadership. That's what that is. I should also mention 1689. That was the year that Peter married his first wife, or was kind of made to marry his first wife, whose name was, is it Eudoxia?
Yes.
Okay. And incidentally, she is the last ethnically Russian wife of a ruler. Because I don't know if it was another episode where we talked about, because we talked about the Romanovs and the last Tsar.
Yes.
How they all married foreigners, Germans and so forth.
How they were all technically German.
Yeah. But anyway, but she wasn't. She was the last Russian. And you could not say that it was particularly successful, because I think it was about 10 years later that the marriage failed and Peter made her to become a nun. So
yes,
that was
he was
the end
fond
of that.
of doing that.
Yes, I guess it's better than chopping their head off.
I guess. Permanent prisoner, quick death. Yeah, I guess it depends on the personality that's being subjected to the torment.
I don't know, but that was just 1689 was a big year for him.
Yes.
So anyway, okay, so let's get to his taking power.
All right.
Yeah. So as we said, he, correct me if I'm wrong, but the military, I forget what, there's a name for it. The particular royal guard or whatever. It's a Russian name. I'm not sure. I want to say the Stasi. That's not it. That's not it at all. That's not even the right century. But anyhow,
all I can ever think of is Ivan the Terrible's personal guard, and that's the Streltsy.
No,
but
that's not
it. I don't
it.
think that's right.
Anyways, so as we said, Sophia was talking all that nonsense about how his little regiment that he had formed could come and storm the gates and whatever. But it was kind of understood that even though he had not yet assumed the throne. She was still the regent and in charge, basically. It was really understood that the military, and this word that I can't think of, they would, if he would come into town, and they would be loyal to him. Like they were going to choose him. Everyone just kind of knew that, which they did. I mean, obviously, because Sophia did not remain in power, but
unpopular decisions.
Yes, I don't know. That's just how it went. But anyways, so I don't know. Do you want to talk about that, or you want to move forward? Because
you can probably move forward. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. She had made some unpopular decisions, had lost some military campaigns, and Peter saw an opening, and he went and took power.
Right. Short and sweet, more or less.
And sent her to a convent where
is it
he
the
had her.
Streltsy? Is that it?
That's what I thought it was.
Streltsy. I'm having to look it up as we're speaking.
Guard.
I was going to bother me. The Streltsy, which is it's like the kind of like the royal guard sort of thing. We're just going to go with that. Okay. Anyway, so let's get to the end of that. Sophia eventually, after things went on, she was overthrown, and Peter and his brother continued to reign as co-czars for a time, right? Oh yeah, he also made his sister become a nun too, or at least go to a convent or something like that.
Oh yes, he forced her to become a nun, and then he took her former lover and hung his body outside her window and had the nuns lock her in the room.
Wow, I had missed that little detail.
Yeah.
He was not playing around. Anyhow. Okay, so moving on. I think most people, if you have just kind of a cursory knowledge of this time period and Peter the Great or Peter the First, he is known as Russia's modernizer. I mean, that was his drumbeat for pretty much all of his reign, was to modernize Russia, to bring it on par with the West, hence his obsessive building campaign within St. Petersburg.
Mm-hmm.
He did things like insist that people, I guess particularly within the royal court, aristocrats, give up their kind of traditional Russian garb and start wearing Western clothing like waistcoats and stuff like that. He even insisted that the men shave those long beards that you kind of see quintessentially old Russia. You still see a lot of like Orthodox priests with these really long beards. Like that was a big thing. He insisted that not only must they shave their beards, but anyone who refused to do so would be taxed, and they had to wear like this medallion around their neck that said tax paid, which was supposed to be like, I don't know, humiliating or something.
Basically, it's like public shaming.
Yeah.
So that people would fall in line with what he wanted.
Yeah. Anyhow, another funny thing about him is that he was something of an amateur surgeon. So it became common knowledge in court that you really didn't want him to know you weren't feeling particularly well, because he might want to operate on you. There's even a museum, I forget which one, where you can see the collection of teeth that he pulled. Amateur dentist also.
Yeah, because once he found out, it's not like you could say no.
Yeah, like what are you going to do? Say, no, sir, I don't think I want to do that. That would not go over very well. Anyways, so as I say, he's the great westernizer, the modernizer, and he attempted to do this pretty much in every area. Everything from, the dress of aristocrats to, I think, safe to say, the way the military functioned, and just society in general. He wanted them to play catch up and do it quickly. And isn't he the one that kind of viewed Russian society as, or am I thinking of somebody else, kind of backward and old fashioned? And
yeah, he basically bought completely into the Enlightenment and the things going on in the West. Basically like, all these other countries are taking over the rest of the world and building empires, and we've got all this land, but nobody respects us. So we should try to look and act like them so that then we'll get the respect. and we can keep building up our power.
He was also a great military campaigner.
Mhm.
He picked fights with everyone from the Swedes to there was a point where he wanted to take control of at least a portion of the Black Sea. And so he had to expel, what's that group of people?
The Tartars?
Yes, thank you. I was afraid I'm misspelling that. And that sort of thing. And it's interesting if you consider what's going on over there right now, which is extremely controversial. I will admit it's become very, people have very strong opinions about the military stuff going on, Russia, Ukraine, and all that. A lot of the stuff, claims to land and territory and whatever, they've always been seemingly embroiled with things like that, taking this land, taking that land, this is part of us. And it kind of, I don't know, it's just been an interesting cycle.
Always been expanding and saying, oh, that piece of land right over there next to our border, that's ours too.
Mm-hmm.
We'll take that. Yeah, that's also a tradition.
Yeah. And it continues. It's just funny that this was way back in the 1600s, and there's it's just been going on. Anyways, so let's see here, what would be next? I guess there's a lot. I mean, we could get into the details of the different military campaigns, or
big one, the Great Northern War with Sweden, where they acquired the land where he could build St. Petersburg and establish a warm is relative, warm water port to the Baltic.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one.
Yeah. Didn't he get the cooperation of the Austrians, the Hanoverians? Was it for that campaign? Or was it something else?
There were several different alliances throughout the Great Northern War.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, helpers came and went.
There you go. He seemed to be very interested. We talked about earlier how he found that English ship and, learned about sailing and shipbuilding and whatever. He actually studied sawmills.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like he fixated on really particular things like that.
Well, if you want to start building a navy that could be, on par with the other Western powers, you're going to need to upgrade your, carpentry skills.
Right. Wasn't it he that went to Europe kind of incognito?
Yes. His Western tour.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though he was so tall and distinctive looking, everybody figured out who it was.
Well, I mean, he spoke the languages that he knew from the West with a very thick Russian accent. Mm-hmm. He went everywhere with this group of bros and they threw money around like crazy. So everyone knew they were coming whenever they showed up somewhere.
Yeah, I just think that's funny because there are several accounts from people who encountered him in Russia or whatever. And it's like the first thing they all say is how tall he is and big and imposing. Anyway, I find that funny. All right. So he, I'm trying to think. There's so many things that he gets around to in his time. But if you want to move forward, I guess we could get into his reformist period.
Okay.
Yeah. As I recall, some of the reforms that he insisted upon, the Russian Orthodox Church was not particularly fond of. And that seemed to be something that, continued through his entire reign. Was they didn't, I don't really think they saw eye to eye on certain things, the cultural changes.
Well, and the powers in Russia had always been kind of divided between the czars and the Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
So they were sort of another center of power.
I mean, for example, he insisted on changing to use the Julian calendar?
Yes.
Which they hadn't used previously, and so they were not happy about that.
The Gregorian calendar, like the West.
Isn't it
because they would still have been using the Julian calendar.
Maybe that was it. I'm getting it mixed up. Anyhow, He insisted on switching to whatever the Western calendar was, and the Orthodox Church was not happy about that.
Well, it goes back to
he also,
very
I remember,
ancient controversies about the date of Easter and just
people
all
still
sorts
talk
of
about
things.
that. Yeah.
Yes. And
the
like
birth
I said,
of Christ,
with,
so on.
with him in the Orthodox Church, a lot of it was him trying to establish that he was in charge and that they had to do what he said.
Well, and also I have the date here, in 1700 precisely, he prevented the church from electing a new patriarch, because I guess that's an Orthodox thing.
Yes.
Is it like their version of the Pope? I'm kind of ignorant
Basically.
of this. Don't they have more than one?
So they have a patriarch of Moscow, who is the patriarch for the entire Russian Orthodox Church.
Okay.
And then there are patriarchs of other major centers, but he's the supreme
Kind of sounds
one.
like bishops in the Catholic Church. Is that right?
It's the same way that the Pope is the Bishop of Rome, but he's also, the head bishop.
Okay. I'm just trying to translate it from one church to another church. Like the church we used to be a part of, I guess you'd say the different superintendents. Is that it?
Well, kind of, only with, much greater powers within their
Too
church.
much, but you didn't hear that from me. Anyways, as I said, used to be. Anyways, he also, that is Peter, reduced the number of monasteries and forcibly converted many of them to be schools and churches and things like that.
It's another one of the trying to westernize and trying to eliminate other centers of power and authority.
He implemented monetary reform for their currency, which used the decimal principle or something like that. I'm not super well versed in that sort of thing, but it sounds like it would have been a kind of a difference from what they had been doing before. But anyway, I guess my point is he had his fingers in a lot of different pots.
And like I was saying at the beginning, it's like he grew up in a country where the mindset and the way of doing things were still very much the same as they had been in, the medieval era. And he's trying to fast forward all the way to, almost contemporary with things like the French Revolution and the American War for Independence. He's trying to fast forward his country during his lifetime to catch up with everything that had been happening in the West.
Yeah, because he also established a state governing body. Well, a state. It's called the Governing Senate, which
sounds deceptively democratic.
It does. It does. But he called it the Senate, in the tradition of Rome or the U.S. or whatever, even though we weren't a country yet, because that was early 1700s. But anyway, let's say Rome.
Well, because they're the third Rome.
Ah, yes. I believe it's called now and has been called at other times the Duma.
Yes.
But he decided to call it give it a more, I guess, Western
Latinized name.
So that's another. I mean, this guy you just go through the list of topics, and he's probably done something in every category you can think of.
And the surprising thing with all of the cultural changes and all of the, I guess just basically attacks on the church is that he wasn't overthrown and that he stayed as in control of the country as he did.
Yeah. He also got involved in industrialization, which I think it kind of was slow to take off. There were some hiccups, but it eventually was quite successful. And I find it interesting because the main areas had to do with mining and like timber, which funny enough, that's still a huge part of the Russian economy.
And those had both traditionally been huge parts of their economy, exporting timber and, mineral resources. But he just thought, hey, they're doing it so much faster and more efficient in, England. And Germany. So I want to figure that out because we can be making so much more money.
Yeah, which they definitely needed to do to pay for
all the wars.
All the wars and the building and the Navy.
And all the
stuff.
soldiers and people to keep all the subjects in line.
Okay, I'm just going through my notes and going back to Sweden. It was Charles the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
Charles the 12th, because we were talking about that. Couldn't remember which one it was. Anyway, who I believe died in battle,
mm-hmm.
right? Yeah. Okay. I'm just going through my
the
notes.
Swedes were still in their fighting phase,
which is funny because nowadays I can't even.
I know.
Do they have a military? That's just not something you associate with them anymore at all.
They've been neutral so many times.
Well, they had their fill of it back then, and they've just decided to stay out of it. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, Sweden and Denmark have fought more recorded wars than any other countries in the world.
I guess they just reached their limit. It was like, we've had enough. You know what I mean? Anyways, I don't blame them. I mean, I wish that we could, take a page out of that book. But that's another topic entirely. Not trying to get political here. Well, there are other, what is it called? The Great Northern War.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Sweden.
A lot of, as we discussed, there was a lot of military campaigning, which could take a great deal of time to go through.
And the further expansion to the east.
Right. But I guess we could get on into his later life. Yeah. You want to kind of talk about that a little bit?
Well, he didn't get along with his son. He didn't get along with his first wife, so he got rid of her as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then he remarried to a, I can't remember her last name. Her first name is Catherine. And they seemed to get along pretty well, but no children that could inherit. So he still had to leave the throne, theoretically, to his one legitimate son from his first marriage.
Right, who was not exactly up to the challenge. And also, I guess, did this happen before or after their, I guess you'd call it, falling out, when he issued a decree which changed the succession to the throne, like abolished the custom, going from direct descendant, going to the direct male descendant thing?
Yes.
Was that before or after they, didn't get along anymore?
But it sounds like something that would have happened around the time of the falling out.
Because my understanding of that whole situation is that the son, as we discussed, Peter I was constantly on the road, you might say. He traveled a lot for work. Mm-hmm. He was gone on his military campaigns and, going to Europe and that sort of thing. So the son grew up almost completely without Peter's input or involvement, I guess you'd say. So he was raised by his mother. He was raised by, presumably, tutors. And my understanding is most of those people were of very traditional Russian mindsets. And as such, the son grew up. What was his name? What was his name? I can't remember his name right now. That's terrible. Anyway, he grew up with these views, and it said that while his father was obsessed and loved St. Petersburg for all the westernness that it had, the son preferred the tradition of Moscow. And so there was this great divide between the two of them. They had basically nothing in common. They did not share the same views on anything. And so Peter, pretty much too little too late, when he realized this, he decided to come down hard, iron fist, and take control and try to undo the years of influence of all these other people, which, I mean,
that'll work.
Yeah, because that'll totally work. So he started bringing him along, on his trips and trying to influence him to
take up his mindset on the ruling of Russia.
And it didn't work. Didn't work at all. So the end of that story is that, I don't know if it was it confirmed that the son was trying to do away with the Tsar, or he was just accused of that? I forget.
I mean, at this point, how will we really know?
I don't know. He was accused of it, and the end of the story is the son was executed.
Yep.
So that was the end of it. Word to the wise: be around when your children are growing up so that they don't, become a terror to you or whatever. And maybe just don't be such a jerk.
Yeah. I
think
that's a big part of this.
Yeah. So that went on. So Do you want to talk about kind of the end of his life, or how to close this out, let's say?
So he was very hard on his body during his life, what with all the drinking and the partying and everything.
Yeah.
So he started to kind of break down relatively young, I believe in his 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't have a son, so his succession was going to have to be to...
Oh, that's right. That's a big part of this story. I
Yeah.
almost completely went over it. He made his wife Empress.
Yes.
Catherine. Yes. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah. So he did have daughters,
Mm-hmm.
but he chose to make his wife the empress and leave the succession to her.
Yeah. I was just looking through here. He died when he was 52 years old, and
That's right.
an autopsy
Younger than I thought.
showed that his bladder was infected with gangrene.
Mhm.
So that would do
Not
it.
a good way to go.
Not at all. Very unfortunate. So, yes, that's why it passed from him to his wife, because of the whole son-children incident. But yeah, anyway, he lived quite a, what's the word I'm looking for? Colorful.
Very colorful reign.
Yes.
Some high highs and some extremely low lows.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And I found that he is the subject of, I guess you'd say, controversy amongst academics and people that study this sort of thing. Some people think he was just amazing and all these reforms and it was so great and westernization and all this. And other people see him, as like this iron-fisted jerk
tyrant who destroyed traditional Russian culture.
Yes. So I don't know if I'm qualified to give an opinion. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle, which seems to be the case in a lot of these stories. Some of the things he did were great for the economy, for, people to be, if they wanted to be free of some traditions that were not particularly, it wasn't a big deal. If you want to be more westernized, fine. If not, that sort of thing. But he went too far, obviously, with things like you have to wear Western clothes and you have to shave your beard.
Change.
It's too much. It's like you took it too far. As we say to our youngest brother, you went too far. You should have stopped back there. You had us until you crossed right over there. Too far. Anyway, so yeah, he's an interesting figure.
And anytime a ruler is given the title the Great,
which
there's going to be controversy about, were they any good at all?
Yeah.
Or were they just a monster? Or did they deserve the title?
Yeah. Because if we do an episode on Catherine the Great, I have some strong opinions about her.
Oh, yes.
But that's for another day. Anyhow, I kind of wish we would have made this. Maybe we will make it a 2-part episode, because there's a lot that we didn't get to. There's a lot of more details and what have you. I will recommend, and as I say, anytime you are studying history, reading about these people, I think it's important to take with a grain of salt the opinions that you hear from various academics, whatever books you're reading, lectures you're listening to. Everyone has a slant, a viewpoint.
Yeah, it's always good to cross-check your resources.
Right. So, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. Anybody that's listening to a podcast like this, I'm sure you know this, but it's really best because the opinions can vary so greatly is what I've learned. So, read a book from this perspective and then make sure you read or listen to something from the other side and then try to find where things cross. I feel like that's where you get the best picture.
Yeah. Anytime you can just find like the actual information that these people they're building their whole argument on. That's the best part. Just find the actual information.
Yeah. Anyway, my point about that is that in preparation for this and just part of my whole Russian history rabbit hole thing that I've been going down for like weeks at this point, there is a lecture series it's from that company called the Great Courses? I think it's called the Great Courses.
So I believe Great Courses is owned by a company called Wondrium now.
Okay.
but they have ownership of all of the Great Courses materials. But you can also buy Great Courses lectures from Audible. Those are the two places I know of where you can get them.
I listened to one, the History of Russia Great Courses on Audible, and I found it very interesting. The lecturer, I forget his name, in my opinion, was not terribly slanted or didn't seem to have a huge agenda. I mean, everyone has an agenda to some degree, but I found it helpful considering the other things that I've read and listened to. It starts with Peter it actually starts a little bit before Peter the Great, but then very quickly gets to him and then goes all the way through. I think the last lecture was like the late 90s, early 2000s. So it's not up to completely modern, but all we're interested in is the history from way back in the day. So that's helpful. If you want to hear more details that we didn't get to on this, that's a good resource. But then, there's all kinds of books and what have you. But point being, if you want more in-depth information about Peter the Great that we weren't able to get to today, although we might have a follow-up, I haven't decided yet. Check out those resources because that's what I do.
And we're going to try to include more resources that we've used and that you can look into with the podcasts coming up in this next season.
We got to start giving citations. My professors would be appalled. Absolutely. Like you were in school for 10 years and you can't cite to your source. Come on. Just I think we're going to start in the description. If we mention something directly from a book or whatever, and it's not just our opinion, it'll be in the description and we're going to do our best. I can't 100% promise it, but we will try. I can actually probably do that for this one. The Great Courses I'm talking about, a couple of the books that I have read.
We can put them in the description.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, not to belabor it, but just kind of setting it up going forward. So Luke, we talked about this. I think I mentioned it on the last Tea and Shenanigans, but the next episode, if I don't do a part 2 on Peter the Great, it's the third time I've said that. I'm sorry. I think we're really, really going to delve into Isabella of Spain.
Yes, my Spanish history rabbit hole that I've been going on.
Yes, love it. Most people know of Ferdinand and Isabella. They always seem to go together, and that's great. But we want to look at them individually because they're both very interesting people. They definitely deserve their own episodes. So we're going to split it up, Isabella and Ferdinand, or then Ferdinand and then Isabella, one or the other.
Yes.
That's probably...
And because there always seem to be mentioned peripherally in connection to other events happening in the world.
Christopher Columbus.
I really want to look at
sailed the ocean blue,
have us take a look at them in the context of when these things that everybody knows about that are connected to them happened in their life and in their reigns.
I like that.
Because it's much more interesting when you know what was actually going on.
Yeah. Like the world that they were living in while they were doing what they were doing.
Yes.
Yeah. I like that. Okay. So that'll be at least the next 2 episodes. And then from there, I don't know. We'll see where the wind takes us.
Yes.
Right. There's a lot.
And we're going to try to do some special episodes in the near future.
Oh, that's right. What was the one we were talking about recently? Like the firsts.
Yes.
Explain what you mean by that.
So looking at either founders of dynasties or individuals who were the first to embody a particular aspect of royalty.
I want to do one
and kind of dealer's choice where we both get to pick the ones that we want.
I like that. I want to do one where we discuss, because there are many, and some there'd be more information available than others, where we take the royals, kings, and queens that are mentioned in the Bible, and because it's in the Bible, but there's plenty of historical accounts outside of the Bible that we could use. So
yes,
biblical royals.
And a big part of that is also it gives you context for a lot of other people that we've covered, because they were the models for most of the European royal courts.
Right.
That they would look to, examples from the Bible and be like, oh, I want to be like Solomon, or I want to be like David.
We could do King David, Solomon, Darius, and then we could go over to the quote unquote bad guys like Ramses in Egypt and that, that sort of thing, or
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, thank you, Nebuchadnezzar. all that. There's a lot to choose from, but that'd probably be a multi-part series.
Yeah, probably more of a specials series.
Yeah, but anyway, we just want to mix it up so it's not all just royals. I mean, Europeans. What?
the king of Iraq, his fiance that he didn't get married, so they killed him. She just died last week.
Okay, so our producer and my lovely husband is saying that as an update to our episode on the last king of Iraq, King Faisal II, as some of you may know, he was engaged at the time of his death, and he was supposed to have been married just, like a couple days after he actually was killed. And his fiance just passed away, a couple days ago?
Yeah.
Very recently. So, wow. And that's been...
She was 89 years old.
Wow. And that was been like over 60 years ago, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I don't remember her name. Egyptian?
She's from Turkey.
Was she? I should know this.
Parents from Egypt, but she lived in Turkey.
Okay. So she was living in Turkey. Anyway, well, bless her. That's I'm sure she had quite a life after having your king fiance murdered, and then you have to go on with your life. This is taking a dark turn. I didn't mean to get into all this. It was just a little news update.
It was our little promo for what's coming up in the season.
Right. Okay. Well, I think we've gone on long enough. I've prattled on long enough. I don't know about you, Luke, but so that's the end of it for today. Thank you all so much for listening. We're thrilled that you've stuck with us, considering we've been away for a few months, just taking our summer hiatus, but we're back, and hopefully we're gonna be producing episodes. It's probably gonna be like every other week at this point, and we'll just see how it goes. But yeah,
that would be a wonderful goal for us to hit.
It would be. We should have a Teen Shenanigans episode coming up fairly soon. There's been a lot of things going on, Luke. Let me tell you, I can just rock your world when we get on with that. Okay. But anyways, that's for another time and another place. Thank you so much for listening. I've noticed we've gotten a couple new subscribers, even though we haven't been posting anything. So whoever
thank you so
are,
much.
Thank you. We greatly appreciate you. And as we say, we always enjoy, or we really appreciate your time, because there is so much online that you can listen to and, choose from. So if you're listening to us, we appreciate it. Check us out. Follow us on our social media. Of course, you're probably on YouTube or Spotify. We're also on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, possibly X, formerly Twitter. I think we are. But anyway, we're going to start becoming more active on there. But thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time.
Bye.
The Royal Chronicles is written and produced by Hannah Mohana and Luke Haney. Executive producer Mustafa Mohana.